The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Lining up, Adrian Neville, and here it comes. Balloon kick to nuts.
Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of GameDay. I first off just want to preface this by apologizing for taking so long to put out another one. Mainly just been trying to look for good topics to discuss and got a good one today. One that I probably should have covered essentially like at the start of this whole thing because it was one of the very first topics in sports that really got me into sports journalism. And so basically, currently in the NFL, the following awards are given out at the end of the year: the Coach of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. And of course, there is the main award, the NFL MVP, the most prestigious award in the NFL, an award given to the most valuable player in the league, the player who was the most valuable asset to their team, and many times the player with the best season. But what exactly entails the best season? Is it who has the best statistics that year? Is it what team had the best record and what player was on that team with the best record? Is it a game of hypotheticals, as in trying to determine if a player's team would have been successful without them? Is it about which player has the best story or narrative surrounding them? No, that would be the NBA MVP, but that's another story for another time. But in all honesty, the NFL MVP award is supposed to be a mixture of all those things. You have to be important and an important enough player to your team's success, have the stats that prove that and back that up, and you have to have played a significant amount of the season. Realistically, when it comes to the NFL, you really can't miss more than 1 or 2 games, unlike other leagues that have more games. NFL, you can't miss really 1 or 2 and still be in contention. You have to pretty much be healthy that entire season. And then, of course, you also got to have a decent enough story playing out throughout this season to get you that fan and media support, Is it, this guy's having an MVP-like performance despite not having as great of assets around him as other players are, or not having as great of a team around him, or just something that gets the fan support, like this is like he could be like the youngest MVP or stuff like that, or he's a young player yet having one of the best seasons in history. All these things have to factor into the decision, and they really do when this decision is made by the NFL's Associated Press at the end of the season. But to me, there is a huge glaring flaw in the voting process and criteria of the NFL MVP. And it's for this reason that I believe that the NFL MVP award needs to see some change to it. So, let's just get straight into it and address the elephant in the room. The big issue with the NFL MVP award is that it's not awarded to the best player that season. It is awarded to the best quarterback that season. What quarterback had the best combination of stats, record, impact, etc.? And it's been like this for years. It isn't something new. It's been an issue for the longest time, where we've seen many historic seasons go unrecognized due to the MVP being a QB award. And yes, I understand the arguments for it. For the most part, the quarterback is the most important piece to a team, and a team's success is tied to how great their quarterback is. Or is it? How many times have we seen how many times have we seen teams with great quarterbacks that see little to no success? How many times have we seen great teams go on to win it all with an average QB? Many times we've seen teams go on to success after upgrading at QB, such as the Rams this year and the Bucks before, and countless other examples as well. And there's evidence for both sides of this argument, because then you look on the opposite side. How many times have we seen a quarterback's impact nullified because other positions were lacking? Patrick Mahomes became David Carr in the Super Bowl against the Bucks because his entire offensive line was injured and they just couldn't compete against that Bucks stellar defense. He was completely pressured and sacked all game, forced to make terrible throws and incomplete passes. All of Patrick Mahomes' superstar ability just completely nullified like that because what was he missing? His offensive line being healthy. I, as an Eagles fan, know a better example. Look at how many times people try and discredit the Eagles Super Bowl win because they start talking about how Tom Brady put up a historic defense and it was all for nothing. Or historic performance, all for his defense to just allow the Eagles to completely and constantly one-up them in that game. And people constantly discredit it, saying that, oh, well, if Brady had a good enough defense, he would have won that year. And then, of course, Cam Newton was the league MVP and yet was completely and utterly torn apart by the Broncos defense in Super Bowl 50. Every year, Aaron Rodgers is putting up, these crazy seasons just for what? To get knocked out early in the playoffs. Either, sometimes it's due to himself, and his abilities being nullified in those games, or other times people were saying it's his team that was the issue. And 3 out of the 4 examples I just gave you saw the league's MVP fall to factors out of their control, which is funny because you think I had planned that, but those were just the examples that came to the top of my head. And, from here, you can expect kind of 2 arguments. And like the first one you're going to expect is, well, the NFL MVP is a regular season award. Playoffs should not influence who you think is worthy of MVP. And hearing that, let me just say, first off, I am in no way saying that the examples I gave were undeserving of their MVPs. They all have their cases, but, this is just kind of an example of, MVP players being nullified later in the playoffs, But I fully understand it. Yes, the MVP is for the regular season. You're only looking at regular season stats and nothing else. Whatever happens into the playoffs shouldn't factor into that. But at some point, it has to, don't you think? Because if we aren't going to be awarding the MVP to players who couldn't carry their teams to the playoffs, when are we going to start docking players for not leading their teams to success in the playoffs? Because again, I brought it up. Record matters. You're not going to give the MVP to a guy that was on the 0-16 Detroit Lions, even if he put up one of the most historic seasons ever. You're just not going to, because they got no wins. But at the same time, how are you going to give it to a player who can't even lead his team to that much success in the playoffs, This is the league MVP we're talking about. The player who is determined to have the combination of the best stats and most important, because it's in its name, that he's believed that he's the most valuable player to his team and their success. How can we believe that this is the MVP if he's going out of the first round of the playoffs in a blowout? And people are going to argue that historic seasons needs to be recognized and not ignored because of playoff success. But that was literally my first argument. So many historic seasons have gone unrecognized because of blatant quarterback bias. And from here, people are going to bring up an argument that football is a team game and it's not like the quarterback can stop his defense from giving up points, his O-line failing to block, his receivers failing to get open, his kickers not being able to make kicks. Do people not realize how much they're invalidating their argument by saying that? Like, literally just look at everything I just named and think clearly about it. You literally just argued that the quarterback is only as successful as the pieces around him. But let's calm down and break it down a bit, because there's more to it. So first, as immensely valuable as they are, you're never really going to see an O-lineman. Definitely they're not going to ever win an MVP, and you're rarely going to see them get other awards. I saw people this year wanting Creed Humphreys to get an offensive rookie because of, how well the Chiefs' offensive line played and how much he played a part in that. But, no one's going to give it to an offensive lineman. Running backs have won the award a couple times. It's very rare, though. A receiver has never won the award, and that's because many people believe that their stats are tied to the quarterback, that a receiver can't be successful without the quarterback getting the ball to them. And, of course, that makes sense because, a receiver needs the ball thrown to them, so they're only as, for the most, well, no, you can't even say the argument that they're only as great as their quarterback is, because look at DeAndre Hopkins. That man had average quarterbacks until Deshaun Watson, and yet he was still doing really great, for his team. And then you have a case like Devontae Adams where he had a great quarterback, but it took him years to fully blossom, you know. So it's like, but like, you know, that's the way most people see it, is that they're tied together like that. But to me, it's partially true, like I said, because it is true that they can't succeed without the quarterback throwing them. But realistically, it's the quarterback stats that are tied to the receivers. Because answer me this. How many times have we seen a quarterback make like a 10, 15-yard throw, a little check down or whatever, and then the receiver goes and takes it for like an extra 30 yards? And of course, the receiver gets credit for all those yards because they're the ones that caught the ball and ran those yards. But so does the QB. How does that make sense? You throw a 10-yard pass and get credit for 40 when the extra yardage was what your receiver ran? To me, that's where quarterback stats are so overrated in this matter, because one year, I forget what exact year it was, but like I did a rough estimate. I obviously couldn't get like exact statistics breaking it down because, you know, it's very hard to calculate the yardage, and many people in the league don't really do it as well. Because again, it's very difficult to, like, you know, precisely be like, okay, he caught the ball here, the receiver ran it for this much, credit this to the receiver, credit it to the quarterback. But like I did like rough estimates when taking into account things such as yards after the catch, and then that little like section that shows you the amount of like throws a quarterback has had over this certain amount of yards. You know, this is how many 20+ yard passes they've had, you know, and all that. And when you like try your best to do a rough estimate and calculate that and dock that from quarterback stats, for the most part, the quarterback stats that year were all looking average, you know. Like they had average stats once you factored in just how much the receivers played a fact into their stats of how much they've done it, you know. Because it's like I said, you know, it just, to me, it doesn't make sense to give quarterback 50 yards credited to them when the receiver caught it for like 10 yards. You know, they threw a 10-yard pass and then he's the one that took it for an extra 40, and yet quarterbacks are getting credited all 50 of those yards when all he did was make the 10-yard pass. Going back, only twice has a defensive player won the MVP award, and only once has a kicker actually won it in a shortened year. And, you know, so I get it. When it comes to some of these other players, it's way tougher for these players to kind of have a visible, complete impact over their team. J.J. Watt had historic seasons in 2012 and 2014, but didn't have the team success to win it. You know, no one's winning MVP with, like, I think one year they had a 2-14 record one of those years. Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey have all had great seasons at the running back position, but couldn't even get a single MVP vote, none of them. Cooper Kupp got the Triple Crown this year and only got one vote. Really, when it comes down to it, the media and generally most fans will just always believe that the quarterback is most valuable. They're the leader and responsible for their success, and it is true. Many times we've seen a team be so complete, but see little success because they had an average QB that can't elevate the play of others. But to me, it's not such a lopsided argument because, again, there's evidence on both sides. Did the Broncos win Super Bowl 50 because Peyton Manning, or because of their defense disrupting Cam Newton so harshly that the Panthers can never get momentum? Did the Bucs win both of their Super Bowls because their quarterbacks put up historic numbers, or because their defense was wrecking the opposing offense, creating turnovers and overall being disruptive enough that the offense just had to essentially game manage their way to the win? Matt Ryan won the MVP the same year he and the Falcons choked Super Bowl 51. Again, I'm not trying to discredit these players, and I understand that they held the keys to the success of their teams during the regular season and should be rewarded for that, but success during the regular season should transfer to the postseason. Would we reward a coach or a team for having great success in the regular season just to get eliminated in the first round? Would we talk about and award a team for going undefeated but losing in the playoffs? No. The Patriots' undefeated season isn't talked about unless we're talking about the fact that Eli Manning beat them in the Super Bowl and ruined that perfect season. the Warriors beat the Bulls record and no one talks about it because they didn't get the ring to go with it. So my main argument is, how can I believe that these guys are most valuable to their team if they fail and people start making excuses for them, you know? And so I'm generally speaking about just, how it needs change, and that, like, a lot of it comes from the criteria basis because it's ever so changing. And that's something that happens in all the leagues where, criteria for what makes the person the MVP this season is always different, especially the NBA, man. The NBA, it's like it's always a different narrative each time. It's like, oh, well, one year it's because LeBron is this old and he's still having these stats. Another year it's, oh, this guy's young and up and coming and all that. Another season it's, oh, this guy has the best advanced stats. The other time it's, oh, well, he has the best record on the best team and like has good stats. And another time it's, oh, he's on a terrible team, but without him they wouldn't have gotten to the playoffs, And it's similar here where there's just so many things that constantly change in the criteria that you can never truly know what is like the defining basis for it. And, but I'm here speaking about change, but I've yet to say, what changes I actually want to see. I've yet to give input, and that's something that a lot of people do, is they just call for change but don't provide the answers. But so I'm going to do that right now. So first, I just simply want the league to stop acting like the MVP is anything other than a QB award. That's what it is. Stop trying to make it seem like it's anything else. This is a quarterback league. They get the big deals. The rules cater to them, etc. Stop trying to make it seem like it's anyone else's award to win. You've seen it where it's just like people, especially like the media, they're always trying to make it seem like, oh, well, like this season, oh, Jonathan Taylor could most definitely get it. Oh, Derrick Henry, when he went for 2K, could have most definitely got the MVP, as people were saying. During that time, they were just trying to come up with arguments for other players. And it was like, who are we fooling ourselves? It's obviously going to go to whatever team has like the best record and their quarterback is putting up, great stats. But so how do we change that? Well, one option is just simply make the criteria clear cut and maybe change the voting process. Instead of changing every year, just make it clear what matters most. Is it stats, record, impact, and then maybe change who's voting on these awards. Eliminate as much bias as possible. Eliminate as many writers from certain teams, or not certain teams, but like the certain states covering those teams. Like, eliminate as much bias, because it's not going to make sense if there's a guy on there who writes for the Bills, like writes about the Bills, and of course if he sees the stats are great, it's like you don't want the bias of, oh, well, he's going to vote Josh Allen, obviously, to get the MVP and take away votes from a guy who arguably could have a better season. Maybe start taking on player input from like past or present. Take it from guys who have played either against them or have played the game enough to tell you who's having the biggest impact on their team. Another option is to take the Madden / college football route and just create individual awards. I know people's main complaint with this will be that it feels like we're just handing out participation awards, but this isn't baseball or basketball. There are different positions that require different skills. In the NBA, there's one Rookie of the Year award because every position does, like, they're expect the same thing. It's not like, they're split on sides. People in the NBA play offense and defense. There's no need for two different awards, defensive rookie, offensive rookie, like in the NFL, because the skill set is the same basically for everyone in the NBA to learn. Obviously, they'll be better at certain things, but like in the NFL, why are you going to judge a defensive player against an offensive player? It doesn't even make sense. And how would you even compare the stats when it's two completely different realms, You're comparing a quarterback and how many yards he let up, how many turnovers he created, with a running back with how many yards he rushed for and how many touchdowns he got. That doesn't make sense, Baseball and basketball, you only have those one type of awards because everyone's playing the similar suit that you can judge them on. Whereas in the NFL, like I said, there's different skill sets and different positions that you got to account for. That's why they have the offensive rookie and the defensive rookie. You aren't going to measure the stats of a linebacker against the stats of a receiver. So instead of grouping these players and comparing them against people of different positions, at this point, I think it's just best, like I said, college football route, the way Madden has it, where you just get separate awards and name them after historic players if you want, because that's a way to get fan support. Is you can start naming them after, people of the past as recognition. The Barry Sanders Running Back of the Year Award, the Jerry Rice Receiver of the Year Award, the Lawrence Taylor Linebacker of the Year Award, And again, people will complain and say it's too many words if you're giving it for each position, quarterback, running back, receiver. This one can include tight ends if you want. O lineman, D lineman, linebacker, DB, which would include safeties and cornerbacks. People might feel like that's too many awards, but let me just ask you this. How? I get, you're looking at oh, that's so many awards, but people are still having to decide who to name the best at that position each year. The players are still being regarded as the best amongst their peers. To me, it helps recognize historic seasons and can even be incentivized. Because think about it. You can tie money bonuses to it. Hey, if you're the wide receiver of the year, we'll give you a bonus. And also legacy status, where it's like, these awards can count towards whether they get in the Hall of Fame, because, so many times when someone gets into a Hall of Fame, people are always like, well, what year were they considered the best wide receiver of that year, And so this can be something that helps them prove that, And it's something to encourage the players to play at a top level, and it would honestly do wonders for the game because you'd get higher intensity games with players playing at their highest level. Not that they don't already do that, but it would add an even boost to it because, they want to play at a higher level to get that recognition, get those bonuses, the legacy status. You start friendly rivalries as players start to prove, against each other that they're the best at their position or that they're better than certain players depending on how highly they rank in the voting, which in turn will make them play again with a fire to prove the media wrong. Hey, the media didn't think I was better than this guy, or they just flat out didn't think I was one of the, let's say top 10 best quarterbacks a year. And that's not saying you do a top 10 list, but based on who got the votes, it's like, oh, this guy got the majority of the votes for first. Here's who came in second for the award, third, and if someone's like, hey, I wasn't even in contention, that gives them that fire to prove them wrong. And, it's simply put, it's just a change that would bring new life to this league. And even then, you can still maybe keep the MVP award around and just have it be like an ultimate prize, just like the Super Bowl is, You can still find ways to determine, all right, who is the true MVP of their team, who was most valuable to it. And of course, that's always going to come down to hypotheticals because you could look at stats, you could look at the records, and then you have to play the hypothetical game of, oh, well, would they have been as good? In some cases, you get that, where a player maybe gets injured for a portion of the season, but then, obviously they're out of contention at that point if they miss a certain amount of time. But we've seen cases where it's like a guy goes down for a couple games and it's like, well, the team still won. Who was it? Was it Seattle? Was it the Saints? I forgot what year it was and what team it was, but there was people were talking about, oh, this guy, he's the most valuable player to his team. But yet the guy got injured, the quarterback, and they went on to win. I think they went 4-1 in his absence, and everyone was just like, how is he the most valuable to his team if his team was still successful without him? And you can argue, oh, well, they won't see playoff success without that quarterback, but let me bring you an argument that's close to heart. Carson Wentz was looking like he was going to be the MVP in 2017. And then he goes down and Nick Foles comes in. They base the system around him, the play style around him. And he goes on not only to lead them to success to secure the number 1 seed, but he goes on to lead them to the Super Bowl. And so at that point, yes, Carson got us there, but you start looking at it and just going, well, how can you truly name him that MVP when his team went on to win the Super Bowl without him? And yes, you can argue, and yes, of course, the main argument is he got him there, which is very true. They wouldn't have gotten to that point without Carson. But like that's a portion that hurts the argument. Is, hey, he was out and they still won it without him. So like that's another thing of just like truly looking at that. It's like, hey, is there a way to feasibly look whether like at past instances of this certain player where it's like, oh, if he like look at all the times he's maybe missed time and missed playing with his team and look at what it was like. Obviously that gets difficult because teams change year to year, but that's just something like that they could do while still keeping the MVP around, while still having these other awards, simply because, like I said, I want more of these players to get the recognition that they deserve, because so many times it seems like they go unnoticed, they go unrecognized, despite getting support from their peers and maybe different media, but they go unrecognized, and it really just causes, such controversy, because then, they start getting into it with, like, different people, especially, like, the media, players have gotten into it and stuff, and that's why I say it's like, it's a way to recognize them without making it feel like, oh, everyone gets an award, because you're still ranking them as the best amongst their peers. And again, you're ranking them within a group that logically makes sense, like, because like I mentioned before, you're not going to judge a defensive player stats compared to an offensive player's stats. And so, I think it could do wonders for the league. I think it doesn't necessarily require the MVP award being retired in a sense, like done away with. You can still have an MVP award while still having all these other awards, and they can all still seem prestigious and valuable, because again, naming it after an older player, especially that had a great skill set, will make it look prestigious. The fact that you're proclaiming this person as the best of their group, they're best of their group in the entire league. They're the best wide receiver in all of football. They're the best quarterback in all of football, compared to, in a sense, because usually it's the starters, compared to, 32 other, wait, is it 30? Yeah, the NFL has 32. 30, compared to 32 other teams quarterbacks, or 31 teams other quarterbacks, this one quarterback is the best out of all of them. It still has significance behind it. But with that being said, I just want to thank you all for joining for another episode of Game Day. And as always, remember, many things in this life may seem impossible, but if you fight for your dreams will fight for you.